Corvan had 17 copper coins left when the messenger arrived and told him the valley was gone. Not burning, not under siege. Gone. 3 villages, 2 mills, the river crossing, and the old stone bridge his grandfather had helped lay. All of it turned to flat black nothing in a single night. The survivors, what few there were, had walked out of the dark speaking in the loose, disconnected way people speak when their minds have gone somewhere quiet to wait out the horror. He was sitting outside the garrison post in Fenwick when the messenger stumbled past. The man was not delivering any official notice. He was just walking and talking, because walking and talking was the only thing keeping him upright. Corvan set down his cup and followed him. The commander of the Fenwick garrison was a woman named Bretta. She was 53 years old, built low and wide, and had spent the last 2 decades managing border disputes between farmers. She was not a war commander. Nobody in Fenwick was. The nearest real army was 11 days east in the capital, and the capital had already received its own message that morning. The same message, sent by a different rider, written in the scorched handwriting of a man who had dictated it because his hands no longer worked. Bretta spread the reports on the table in the garrison's main room. 8 people stood around it, including Corvan, who had no official reason to be there but walked in anyway, and nobody stopped him. The reports said the same thing from different mouths. A dragon, one dragon, flying southwest from the Keth Ridge line, no nesting behavior, no territorial display, no warning calls, just arrival and consequence. The witnesses described the color as dark red, almost black in low light, with a wingspan that blocked out enough sky to make midday look like dusk. Nobody at the table said anything for a long time. Then a young soldier named Pell, who was 19 and had been stationed in Fenwick for 4 months because his uncle knew someone, said, "What do we do?" Bretta looked at the map. "We send word east." "The capital is 11 days, Corvan said. "I know how far the capital is." "Then you know 11 days is a long time if it comes back." She looked at him the way people look at someone who is saying the true thing at the wrong moment. "What would you have me do? We have 40 soldiers, 2 crossbows that actually work, and no siege equipment. We are not equipped to fight something that leveled 3 villages in 1 pass." "I know," Corvan said. "I am not suggesting we fight it." "Then what are you suggesting?" He did not answer immediately. He was looking at the map, at the ridge line, at the shape of the valley it sat above, and the angle of the attack, and where a thing flying southwest from the Keth Range would logically go next if it continued on the same heading. "It is going somewhere," he said. "It is not hunting randomly. The 3 villages are in a straight line." Bretta leaned over the map. One of the other soldiers leaned in too, then another. The line was not perfect, but it was close enough, 3 points of destruction on an arc that, if extended, pointed directly at the city of Drenmouth. 40,000 people, the largest population center within 300 miles. The room went very still. Pell said quietly, "We should warn them." "A rider to Drenmouth takes 2 days, Bretta said. "If the dragon is moving at the pace this suggests, it could be there in 1. "Then we send 2 riders now," Corvan said, "and we figure out what slows it down." "Corvan," Bretta said his name like it was a complete sentence. "We are 40 soldiers in a border post." "I know what we are." He picked up the map and looked at the ridgeline again. The Keth Range bent south just above the valley, creating a narrow pass that anything flying that heading would travel through or over. There was only one high point along that pass where a crossbow shot would have any angle at altitude. He showed her. "I am not asking anyone to kill it. I am asking what it would take to make it change direction." "Silence." Pell looked at the map and then looked at Corvan. "You want to annoy a dragon." "I want to buy Drenmouth 1 more day." He set the map down. "That is 40,000 people. If 2 riders leave now and something on this ridge slows the dragon even by hours, some of those people get out." Nobody moved for a moment. Then Pell picked up his crossbow from the wall and checked the string without saying anything. It was not a brave gesture. His hands were shaking. He just did it anyway. 2 more soldiers moved, then another. Not because Corvan outranked them, he didn't. Not because they thought it would work. The truth, and every one of them knew it, was that it probably wouldn't. They moved because Pell was 19 years old, and his hands were shaking, and he picked up the crossbow anyway, and something about that made it impossible to stay still. Greta looked at the 8 people in the room. Then she began to fold the map. "We will need torches," she said, "and every bolt we have." Outside, the sky to the southwest was clear and cold. Somewhere beyond the ridge, something old and enormous was still moving. It did not know about the garrison at Fenwick. It did not know about Corvan or Bretta or a 19-year-old soldier with shaking hands. It did not consider humans worth knowing about. That was the first mistake. The pass was called Heller's Notch on the garrison maps, though nobody in Fenwick had used that name in years. It was just the gap in the ridge, the place where the stone walls of the Keth Range pinched together before spreading back out into open sky. Every trader coming from the north used it. Every shepherd moving summer flocks used it. It was the only sensible way through. Corvan climbed it in the dark with a torch in one hand and the map in his coat. Behind him came Bretta, Pell, and 5 others. They carried the 2 working crossbows, 4 hunting bows belonging to soldiers who had brought them from home, 2 crates of bolts, a bag of all-soaked rags, and a coil of heavy rope. They also carried, somewhat absurdly, 3 large iron bells that Bretta had taken from the garrison's signal rack. When Corvan asked about them, she said she had an idea. He did not press her. They reached the high point of the pass 2 hours before dawn. The wind up there was cold and constant and smelled like stone and old ice. Below to the southwest, the valley floor was dark. There were no lights from the 3 destroyed villages. There was nothing down there anymore. Bretta looked at the angle of the ridge and the sky above it and positioned her people without needing to discuss it. She put the 2 crossbows on the highest rocks. She sent Pell and 2 others down 30 feet to a ledge on the south face with the hunting bows. She tied the iron bells to 3 separate outcroppings and attached long pull cords that ran back to where she stood. Corvan watched her work. "The bells are for timing," he said. "It was not a question." "If we are very lucky," she said, "it will be flying low enough through the notch that we get 1 pass, maybe 2. The bolts are not going to do serious damage, but sound at close range bothers them. I have read the old accounts. They do not like the resonance of iron bells near their ears. It will not stop it, but it might push it off the line for a few minutes." "That could be enough." "It could be nothing," she said. "I want you to understand that clearly. We might light our torches and ring our bells and shoot our bolts, and it will fly straight through without slowing and kill everyone in Drenmouth exactly when it was going to anyway." "I know. And you still think we should be here? Someone has to be." She looked at him in the torchlight. She had the face of a woman who had spent 50 years deciding whether things were worth doing and had gotten very accurate at the calculation. "You were discharged from the Eastern Infantry," she said. "Yes, for refusing to follow an order. I refused to leave wounded soldiers on a retreat line." "I know what you refused to do." She was quiet for a moment. "I read your record when you showed up in Fenwick. There is not much to do out here." She turned back to the ridge. "I thought you were a problem. Someone who could not follow orders is not useful in a garrison." He said nothing. "I was wrong about the order part," she said. "You follow the ones that matter." Then she stopped talking because talking was done and there was work to do. They waited. Dawn came grey and slow. The valley below filled with light the color of old pewter, and the shadows of the Keth peaks stretched long across the flats. Nothing moved for a long time, and Corvan began to wonder if the heading had been wrong, if the dragon had diverted. If all of it had been a calculation error, and they were standing on a cold ridge for nothing. Pell from the ledge below said quietly, "There." Not pointing, just the word. His voice was completely flat. It came from the north, following the ridge line with the casual precision of something that had made this kind of crossing 1,000 times. It was large. The accounts had not undersold the size. It moved through the air the way a ship moves through deep water with weight that displaced the space around it, so that the wind shifted 30 seconds before it arrived and the torches guttered sideways. The color was dark red, almost black, where the scales layered thick at the joints. Greta pulled all 3 bell cords at once. The iron bells rang, a hard, flat, reverberant clang that bounced off the stone walls of the notch and came back doubled. The sound was wrong in the way that made your back teeth ache. The dragon's head turned. It was not much, just a degree or two, but it was a response, and that meant the bells had touched something, and that meant they had a fraction of a second in which its attention was redirected. Corvan lit the oil rag on the bolt in his crossbow from the torch beside him and fired. He was not trying to wound it. He was shooting at its eye line, a streak of fire in the direct path of its gaze. The others fired too, not all at once, staggered, so the light kept coming. The dragon banked. Not sharply, not in panic, just a smooth, almost imperceptible lean to the south, away from the ridge, away from the notch, away from the direct southwest heading that ended at Drenmouth. It passed overhead so close that Corvan felt the air pressure change against his chest like a door slamming in a distant room. He did not move. None of them moved. It flew south for another mile, then turned back west on a new heading that would take it nowhere near Drenmouth's walls. On the ridge, nobody spoke for a long time. Then Pell, from the ledge below, in the same flat voice, "Did that just work?" Greta was already pulling out paper to write the second warning to Drenmouth. The first rider had left last night. This one would tell them the direction had changed, that they had more time, that someone on a ridge in the dark had bought it for them. She did not answer Pell's question, she just wrote. The dragon came back 4 days later. Not to Heller's Notch, not to the valley. It came to Fenwick itself, at noon, in full daylight, without any pretense of approach. It landed in the square outside the garrison with the slow, deliberate weight of something that has decided a situation requires personal attention. Corvan was sharpening a knife at the garrison steps when the shadow hit him. He looked up. He did not run. This surprised him slightly because running seemed like the reasonable response, and he had always considered himself a reasonable man. But his legs simply did not carry out the instruction. He sat on the step with the knife in his hand and watched it land. The square was empty. Word had traveled fast in Fenwick. The dragon folded its wings with the sound of heavy canvas and looked at the garrison. Its eyes were the color of heated copper, a dark, deep amber with something bright underneath. It was old, not in any way that could be measured by looking, but in the way a river is old, something in the movement, the patience of it, the sense that it had seen the same kinds of things enough times to stop being surprised by them. It looked at Corvan. He looked back. "You were on the ridge," it said. Its voice was not loud. That was the first unexpected thing. He had expected sound that would shake the walls. Instead, the voice came like a low vibration, something more felt than heard, entering through the chest rather than the ears. "Yes," Corvan said. "You diverted me. We tried to. It worked better than expected." The dragon was quiet for a moment. The amber eyes did not blink. "I have not been diverted by humans in 400 years. The last time, there were 300 of them, and they used a mechanism it took 9 engineers to build. We had 8 people and some bells." Something shifted in the dragon's expression, not quite amusement, more like the careful recalibration of an assumption. "Why did you do it? You could not have believed you would survive the attempt." Corvan thought about how to answer that honestly. Drenmouth has 40,000 people. We were 8. The math was clear. "The math," it repeated. "Yes. You sacrificed a probable outcome to serve a possible one. People do that." "Rarely," the dragon said, "and not for strangers, not for a city of people they have never met. We do it more than you think." Another silence. In the distance, somewhere behind the garrison walls, Corvan could hear Greta moving, quietly, deliberately, the way she moved when she was doing something specific. He did not look. He kept his eyes on the dragon. Why have you come here? He asked. I wanted to see what kind of creature stands on a ridge with iron bells and a crossbow, and does not run when something my size comes through a mountain pass at dawn. And I am looking at you, the dragon said, and I still do not fully understand it. That is unusual for me. Corvan set the knife down on the step beside him. It was not a conciliation. It was just that holding it felt pointless now. What were you going to Drenmouth for? The amber eyes shifted, the first real movement since it had landed. That is not a question I expected. I am asking it anyway. The dragon looked away from him for the first time toward the southwest, toward the direction it had been flying before the ridge. The expression that crossed its face was old in the same way its voice was old, something with history behind it. There is a man in Drenmouth, it said, a collector. He has in his possession a set of carved markers taken from a nesting ground 2 decades ago. The nesting ground was destroyed to make way for a trade route. The markers belong to a female of my lineage. They are the only remaining record of her claim. Corvan was quiet. I was going to retrieve them, the dragon said. By burning the city. By burning the part of the city where the collector lives and taking what belongs to my lineage from the ash. That is 40,000 people for one collector. I was not counting the people, it said, and then more quietly, I see that you are. Always. The dragon looked at him again. The copper eyes were steady. Something in them had shifted from recalibration to something harder to name. The markers, it said, is there another way to retrieve them? Corvan looked at the knife on the step. He thought for a moment. I don't know who the collector is, but Bretta has contacts in Drenmouth through the garrison network. If we knew the name and the location, there are legal mechanisms for contested historical property. They are slow. How slow? Months, maybe longer. And if the collector refuses the process? Then there are other mechanisms, less slow. The dragon was silent for a long time. You are offering to help me. I am offering to try. Why? He picked up the knife and put it in his coat. Because 40,000 people, he said, and because if someone took the only record of my family's claim to a home and sold it to a collector, I would want someone to try. The dragon did not answer immediately. When it spoke again, the voice was even quieter than before. What is your name? Corvan. I am called Vethara. It stood, the massive body rising with the slowness of something accustomed to its own scale. If you fail, Corvan, I will go to Drenmouth myself. I know, he said. Give me 30 days. It spread its wings and left the square the way it had arrived, without ceremony, without looking back. Bretta appeared from behind the garrison wall. She had an unlit signal torch in her hand, which meant she had been standing there ready to light it and signal evacuation if the conversation had gone differently. She looked at the empty square. Did you just negotiate with a dragon? I think so. For 30 days. Yes. She looked at the sky where it had gone. You are a very strange man, Corvan. So I have been told. The collector's name was Rolf Ida, and he was the kind of man who had made his money in 3 different ways and was proud of all of them. Pell found that out in 6 hours by asking around the right parts of Drenmouth, which he had learned to navigate quickly because his mother's sister lived on the south side and he had spent 3 summers there as a boy. Corvan had sent him ahead while Bretta worked her garrison contacts from Fenwick, and Pell had done the job with the methodical thoroughness of someone who understood that this errand was the reason 40,000 people were still alive. What Pell found was not encouraging. Rolf Ida had the markers. He had bought them legally, at least legally, by the standards of a sale conducted 20 years ago when nobody was enforcing the old Accord protections. He had them displayed in the main hall of his private estate on the North Hill. He had shown them to guests. He had written a short pamphlet about his collection that mentioned them as examples of pre-civilization dragon territorial marking, which was the kind of language that made the whole thing sound like archaeology rather than theft. He also had 4 lawyers, 2 city judges in his social circle, and a significant financial interest in the trade route that had replaced the nesting ground. Contesting the markers legally would take longer than 30 days, much longer, and it would fail because Rolf Ida had spent 20 years making sure it would fail. Corvan read Pell's report in a burrowed room above a Drenmouth stable and said nothing for a while. Pell sat across from him. "There is one other thing," he said. "Ida knows about Vethara." Corvan looked up. Word travelled from Fenwick. The diversion at the ridge, the dragon landing in the square, traders talk. Ida has heard. He knows the dragon is looking for the markers, and he knows someone bought 30 days. Pell paused. He has hired a worm hunter company, 12 men. They are due in Drenmouth in 4 days. He is planning to kill it. He is planning to try. Pell said it without judgment. He thinks if the dragon is dead, the whole question goes away. Corvan stood and went to the window. The street below was ordinary, carts, people, a dog asleep in a doorway. 40,000 ordinary lives moving through an ordinary afternoon with no idea that a deal struck at a garrison in Fenwick was the only thing standing between them and Ash. "We need to talk to Ida," he said. Pell looked at him with the expression of someone who has learned to trust the strange directions Corvan's thinking went, but who still needed a moment. He is not going to give them back. No, but he needs to hear something before he decides the worm hunters are his best option. Getting into the estate was not difficult. Corvan did not use force or deception. He sent a letter, through proper channels, requesting a meeting as a representative of a garrison with active intelligence on the dragon's movements. Rolf Ida, who was a man who collected things and therefore valued information, agreed to 20 minutes. The estate was exactly as Pell had described. The markers were in the main hall, 8 flat stones, each carved with angular lines in a script that Corvan could not read. They sat on a velvet display shelf between a set of antique crossbow mechanisms and a map of trade routes. The map included the route that had replaced the nesting ground. Ida was in his 50s, comfortable in the way that men who have never been poor become comfortable, not arrogant exactly, but incurious. He received Corvan in the hall and listened with patient attention to the preliminary information about the dragon's movements. Then Corvan said, "I want to talk about the markers." The patience shifted. "They are legally acquired property." "I know, I am not arguing the legal point. I am telling you that Vethara is 400 years old and has already destroyed 3 settlements, and I bought you 30 days by standing on a ridge with iron bells. The 30 days end in 23 days now. The worm hunters you have hired will not make it in time and would not be enough if they did." Ida was quiet. "The markers are stones," Corvan said. "They are old stones with carving on them. You display them between trade maps and crossbow parts. They are interesting to you. To her, they are the only proof her family's home existed. She will burn this city to get them back. She has told me plainly that she will." "Then this city should be better defended." "No city is defended against what she is. You know that. The Worm Hunter Company knows it too, which is why their contract fee was very high." "Silence." Corvan did not press. He let it sit. He had learned, in the infantry and after, that silence after a true thing was more useful than more words. Ida looked at the markers on the shelf. His face did not show guilt. It showed something more uncomfortable than guilt, the look of a man who had arranged things to avoid thinking about certain questions and was now being made to think about them anyway. "If I return them," he said carefully, "what guarantee do I have that she does not come regardless?" "None," Corvan said. "I can tell you what I know of her, which is that she came to Fenwick to look at me rather than burn it, and that she gave me 30 days rather than taking the city at once. But I cannot guarantee anything about a 400-year-old dragon." "That is not a reassuring answer." "No, but it is an honest one." Ida looked at the markers for a long time. Then he called for his housekeeper and told her to get a carrying case. He did not apologize. He did not explain himself. He just moved the stones off the shelf and wrapped them one at a time in cloth and placed them in the case and handed it to Corvan. "Tell her," he said, "not to come back." Corvan took the case. "I will tell her." They met Vethara at the edge of the Keth foothills, 12 days before the 30 were up. Corvan had sent word through a channel he did not fully understand. Bretta had written a description of the meeting point and attached it to a message tube and given it to a rider who knew the northern routes, with the instruction that if he saw the dark red dragon anywhere near the ridge, he should leave the tube at the base of the boundary marker stone and ride in the other direction as fast as he could. He did not know if it would reach her. He went to the meeting point anyway. She was already there when he arrived, sitting in the long grass at the tree line with her wings folded, watching the rider disappear back down the road. The amber eyes turned to Corvan as he dismounted. He opened the carrying case without preamble and held it out. She did not take the stones immediately. She looked at them for a long time. From where he stood, Corvan could see the carved lines more clearly than he had in Ida's hall, angles and repeating marks that, now that he was looking properly, were not random. They had a logic to them, a structure. "How?" she said. "He gave them up. Willingly." Once he understood the alternative clearly enough, yes. Vethara leaned down and took the first stone in a movement so careful it seemed at odds with her size. She turned it over once, slowly, then set it on the ground beside her and took the next, and the next, until all 8 were laid out in a line in the grass. She looked at them for a while without speaking. Corvan waited. He was good at waiting. "These were carved by my mother," she said. "She marked the ground at Thornmere when I was young. She said that the marks meant the land knew us, and when land knows you, it keeps a part of you even after you are gone." She was quiet. "When the ground was destroyed, I thought the knowing was gone with it. The stones kept it." They did. She touched the last one with the tip of one talon, a light, precise touch. "Your kind destroyed the ground, and your kind kept what it held. I do not know how to make that into a single thing." "Maybe it is not a single thing," Corvan said. She looked at him. The copper eyes were direct in a way that felt like being measured against a very old standard. "You are the strangest human I have spoken to in a long time." "Bretta says the same thing." "Who is Bretta?" "The commander of the Fenwick garrison, the one who thought of the bells." Vethara made a sound, not quite a laugh, but something in that territory. "I felt those bells for 2 days after. There is a particular resonance in iron at that pitch that enters the ear differently than other sounds." She read it in old accounts. "Someone wrote it down." "Humans write things down," Corvan said. "We do not have 400 years of memory. We have to use paper." She was quiet again. The wind came through the grass at the tree line and moved around her enormous stillness. "I want to ask you something," she said, "and I want you to answer it honestly." "All right. When you stood on the ridge and fired your bolts at me, were you afraid?" He did not have to think about it. "Yes." "But you did not run." "No." "Why?" He had been asked versions of this question before and had never found an answer that felt complete. He tried for honesty, because Pell picked up his crossbow first. He was 19 and his hands were shaking. "I could not watch that and stay sitting down." Vethara looked at him steadily, "So it was not courage." "I do not know what courage is. I know what I cannot live with." Another silence. The long grass moved. "I have lived 400 years, she said, "and I have watched human kingdoms rise and collapse, and I have concluded, again and again, that your kind is small and brief and mostly occupied with small and brief concerns." She looked at the markers in the grass. "I have been wrong in the same direction for a very long time." Corvan crouched down to the level of the markers. Up close, the carved lines were sharp and clean. The stone itself was a dark basalt, almost black, with a faint grain that caught the light. He thought about a dragon mother carving these on a mountain face. He thought about what it meant to want a piece of ground to know you. "Thornmere," he said, "was the ground ever formally protected under the old accord?" It was registered. The registration was ignored when the trade route was being planned. Her voice was flat. Money moved faster than the accord. Is the registration still in the record? She looked at him. Why? Because if it is, the destruction of the nesting ground was a violation. That means the sale of the markers was conducted under illegal premises. That is a different legal question than what Ida argued. He stood. There is a treaty advocate in the capital who owes Bretta a significant favor. The accord violations from the last century have been getting more attention in the courts. It is not fast. You are talking about legal remedy for a 20-year-old wrong. I am talking about a record, something written down, something that says Thornmere was real, that it was protected, that destroying it was wrong. He looked at her, not because it changes what happened, because the record matters. Vethara was still for a long time. Your kind, she said slowly, builds things that outlast you. Roads, libraries, records. You do it because you know you will not live to see the end result. Yes, that is a strange kind of hope. It is the only kind we have, he said. We are small and brief. We have to work with what we have. She picked up the 8 markers one at a time and held them. Then she said, start the legal process, Corvan. I will wait. He almost smiled. How long will you wait? Longer than you might think, she said. I have time. 14 months later, the ruling came back from the Accord Court in 4 pages of dense legal text and one clear conclusion. The destruction of Thornmere nesting ground was a violation of active treaty protections. The sale of all items removed from the site in the subsequent 20 years was conducted under illegal premises and was therefore void. The original registration of the site, made in the name of Vethara of the Keth lineage, stood. Bretta read it aloud in the garrison at Fenwick on a Tuesday morning, which was an ordinary Tuesday in every other respect. Pell sat on the bench against the wall and listened. He was 20 now. He had grown out of the look of someone permanently about to be surprised and into the look of someone who had decided to pay close attention to things. He had been promoted, which Bretta had done quietly and without ceremony, because ceremony was not how things got done in Fenwick. Corvan was not in the garrison when the ruling arrived. He was on the road north toward the Keth foothills because Vethara had sent word the previous week that something had happened at Thornmere and he should come. He arrived at the mountain on the 3rd day. The crater was still there, the blast damage from 20 years ago had not healed, and rock did not rebuild itself the way living things did. But something had changed. Vethara had been returning to the site since she retrieved the markers. He had not known that, had not asked. What she had done in those 14 months, in the slow work of her own grieving, was remark the stone. Not the entire mountain, just the face of the alcove where the nest had been. New carvings, cut into the damaged rock over the old blast scars, following the same angular script as the markers. From where he stood at the crater's edge, he could see that the new marks and the old damage existed in the same space, not hiding what had happened, but written over it, claiming the ground again, saying, this place is still known. Vethara stood below the alcove and did not look at him immediately when he arrived. He climbed down into the crater and stood beside her and looked at the carvings. The markers he had returned from Drenmouth were set into the rock face at the base of the alcove, fitted into cracks in the stone, held by their own weight. They looked like they had been there a long time. The ruling came through, he said. I know, word travels. He looked at the new carvings. When did you do this? Over the past year, a little at a time. She was quiet. I was not sure at first that it was right to come back here. It felt like insisting on something the world had already unmade. What changed? She looked at the marks for a moment before answering. You told me that humans build things to outlast themselves because they do not have 400 years, that you work with what you have. She turned to look at him. I have 400 years, and I spent most of this one convincing myself that what was lost was simply gone, that this place could not be reclaimed, only mourned. The amber eyes were steady. You stood on a ridge with bells and bought 40,000 strangers one more day. You went to a collector and convinced him to give back stones with nothing but an honest conversation. You started a legal process that took 14 months, and you did it for a place that is not yours and a loss that is not yours. Corvan said nothing. I asked myself, she said, what it would take for me to do the same, to work with what I have instead of waiting for what is gone. She turned back to the carvings. This is what I have, she said, this mountain, these marks, the memory of how they should go. He looked at the alcove for a while. The new carvings were not perfect. There were places where the blast damage had changed the stone's surface, and the lines had to navigate around it, finding new paths. It gave them a different character than the original markers. Not weaker, different, something that had found its way around the damage rather than pretending the damage was not there. He thought it was actually better for that. When they walked down from Thornmere at the end of the afternoon, Vethara spoke once more before they parted at the base of the ridge. The dragon courts have asked about you, she said. He looked at her. Why? Because what you did has traveled. A human who negotiated an accord violation through legal channels, retrieved stolen markers through honest conversation, and diverted a lineage dragon from a city using iron bells and 8 soldiers. She said it without commentary, as though reading a record. They are curious. I did not do any of that for the dragon courts. No, that is partly why they are curious. She paused. They are not accustomed to humans acting without a stake in the outcome. I had a stake, he said, 40,000 people, a mountain that deserved to be remembered, a dragon who should not have had to carry that alone. He looked at the ridge above them, at Hela's notch where the bells had rung in the dark. Those are stakes. She was quiet for a moment. The courts will probably want to speak with you. All right. They will not understand you. Most people don't, he shrugged. Bretta is used to it, Pell is getting there. Vethara looked at him with the copper eyes that had seen 400 years and had, in the past 14 months, learned to see one more thing they had not been looking for. Neither am I, she said. Used to it, I mean. No, he said, but you are trying. That is all any of us do. He walked back down the road toward Fenwick. Behind him, the mountain held its new marks against the old sky, and the ground, in its patient way, began to learn the name again.